Hello everybody, welcome to a new Oxygen XML Editor webinar. My name is George Bina and I will be your host today. A few weeks ago we released a new version of Oxygen XML set of tools and we want to show you today some of the most important additions in version 20. I invited my colleagues Alex and Octavian to show you the authoring, publishing and XML development new additions. And unfortunately, our colleague Stephen was not able to attend. He was supposed to show you some of the DITA-related functionality. Before we start, here it is some useful information. The most frequently asked question during our webinars is whether the webinar will be recorded or not. And the answer is yes, the webinar will be recorded and the recording will be available shortly after the webinar from our YouTube channel and also from the webinar event page. We reserve some time at the end to answer your questions, but we want you to ask questions at any time, and we will be able to answer them as we go, and then take some of the most important questions at that reserved section at the end. To ask questions, please use the questions panel in the GoToWebinar interface, or you can also use Twitter and mark your questions with the Oxygen XML hashtag, or direct them to the Oxygen XML user. So without further ado, please allow me to give control to my colleague Alex, so he can start showing you some of the new important additions in Oxygen version 20. Alex, hello.
Hello, George. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Thank you for registering to this webinar. So for the first part of this webinar, we will look at the new WebHelp Responsive publishing template, talk a bit about what's new in the Web Author, and also what goodies and nice feature we've added for when you work with DITA documents in Oxygen. So for those of you that don't know, the WebHelp Responsive is an online help system which is able to adapt to any screen size. The WebHelp Responsive publishing template is a package that contains a descriptor file and various other resources that together they define all aspects of layout and style for the WebHelp Responsive output. Oxygen comes with quite a few built-in publishing such templates, and to have a look at them, I will go to the DITA Maps Manager and click on the Configure Transformation scenario. I will identify the WebHelp Responsive scenario. A transformation scenario is basically a configuration that contains resources and parameters values that define a specific output. So I will edit this configuration, and on the Templates tab, you will see all available built-in templates. I can use the filters to restrict what I'm seeing and quickly identify a specific template. For example, let's say that I want to focus on this nice and clean light template. And I also have an online preview here, and if I click it, I'll get a documentation generated with this template, and I can have a closer look at it and decide if this is the template that I want to use. To use the template, all you have to do is select it, then click OK, and apply a transformation. Now, if we were to enumerate a couple of benefits that these publishing templates bring, I would say that a publishing template is a great starting point for customizations. You find a built-in template or maybe a template that was created by a third party, and then you start from it and make further changes. Also, a publishing template, it's easy to share with others. And when you upgrade to a new Oxygen version, this upgrade will be painless with regard to your WebHelp Responsive output. And I can also add that it also makes it easier to publish in a continuous integration system, because all you have to do, instead of setting various parameters and resources for that command line, all you have to do is you specify this one publishing template in the transformation pipeline. Now, let's focus on the two benefits that I have enumerated, and let's try to make such a customization starting from a built-in template and see how we can share it with others. For that, I will return to Oxygen, and let's assume that we want to start from this light template and we want to customize it to look something like this. So our documentation is about space exploration. So I would like a rocket logo. And for the search area, let's put a background image with these beautiful stars. Back to Oxygen. Before customizing this template, I will go to the two options. So I will click this Configure Publishing Templates Gallery. And so these are the location where Oxygen searches for publishing templates. And I will add a new entry using the project directory variable. I will tell it to look for templates in my project inside the templates directory. And I click OK. And to make it easy to share, I will save these settings at project level. So I click this project options. So what happens now is that this setting, along with the template that I'm going to create, will reside inside the project. So all I have to do to share this customization is to share the project with the documentation team, and they will automatically have access to the customization that I'm about to develop. So let's return to Oxygen. Click OK. And now I will save this built-in template with a different name. We say it's Space Exploration, and as a description we'll say Space, the Final Frontier. And for the location where it will be saved, it's this templates directory that I've configured inside Oxygen's preferences. So we'll give it a name. The template was saved successfully, and I can see that it was detected and loaded by Oxygen. So let's click OK to okay, let's change the name here of the scenario. It's Space Exploration. And I can apply the transformation now, but it's not gonna look any different. So it's, for now, it's just the original light publishing template from Oxygen. Now we will start customizing it. So for that, back to Oxygen, to the project view. And inside this templates directory, you will notice the template package. If I double click it, it will be opened inside Oxygen Archive browser. Here is that descriptor file that brings all the resources together, and it contains various tags. I can say this is a template about space, and CSS, the CSS files used to style the output, and a preview image, and so on. Before starting the customization, let's copy some images inside the package, like so. I just dragged and dropped. And let's start by putting the logo here. So using the logo element. If you're not sure about the purpose of a given element, you can always check the documentation. It has also a useful link to the user manual where you can get more information. And the file, it's gonna be the rocket logo. Now for the background image in the search area, I will have to go first in the browser and use the tools in the browser to inspect the search area and find out its class attribute. So it's this W search input. And using this value, I can return to Oxygen, and I will create a new CSS file. That's space. A nice shortcut to create a non-existing file is Control Enter and create new file. It is a CSS file. And I can write a CSS rule to add the background image. Now, to speed things up, instead of manually typing this rule, I will copy it from another file, like so. So it basically sets a background image with a little padding to make it look better. So let's save the CSS. And now all we have to do is in the descriptor file, I will use a file set to instruct the transformation that I also need this this background image here, like so. And I think we are all set. So I will go to the DITA Maps Manager and apply the transformation again. And if I didn't forget anything, yes, so we have the logo with the rocket and the constellations here in the search area. So I hope I've convinced you how easy it is to create such a publishing template and to explore some this customization. Unfortunately, we have a lot of features to show you, so I cannot go any deeper and present any more customization ideas. But before going away from the WebHelp Responsive, I think it's worth mentioning a couple of other features that were introduced in the latest version. So for example, now image maps have hotspots in them. So when you hover over such an image map, you'll get the immediate feedback that there is something here. I can see a tooltip, and if I click it, it's gonna take me somewhere in the documentation. Another feature is that we have a table of content generated at topic level. So if your topic contains sections or subtopics, we will generate a table of content at the topic level from these sections, like we have here on the right. Another thing that you can do is here on the toolbar, you can collapse all sections, or you can expand them all. And last but not least, the videos in the WebHelp Responsive output are now responsive, which means that they will adapt to any screen size, like so, for the perfect user experience. Okay, let's move forward and talk a bit about what DITA improvements the new version of Oxygen brings. Again, I had to focus on just a few because there are a lot of things that we want to present to you. So first of all, we have some convert actions. So many times you find yourself in the situation that you want to convert from a particular structure to another in your DITA topics. For example, I'll switch to Oxygen, and here I have a topic that has a couple of inner sections. So it's a topic about aeronautics, and here it's my first section, and here is my second section. And assuming that I want to extract them in their own standalone topics, what I can do in Oxygen 20 is to go on the DITA Maps Manager, and on the refactoring submenu, I will choose Convert Section to New Topics. I can have a nice preview if I want. So these are the new topics that will get generated, each one from a given section. And if we click Finish, we see that in the original topic, the section are no longer present, but in the map here, there are two new topics generated from my sections. I'll switch the project now to show you the next conversion action. So the next one is for converting calls table to simple tables. So in DITA you can create, there are a couple of different table models. So you have the calls table, which gives you a lot of flexibility to merge cells on to span on multiple columns or on multiple rows. And you have your simple tables, which, for example, in which you can use profiling attributes. So let's assume that I have, at some point, I started with a table which follows the calls model, and you can see that here on the breadcrumb that I have a table element with a T group and a T body and so on. And now I realize that I actually should have used a simple table. Manually converting the table, it would be a chore because each of these models have different element names for the table, for the row, for the cell. So it's no point doing it manually. But what you can do in Oxygen is to go in the contextual menu and select the Convert Calls table to Simple Table. I can preview as well, but I won't because, like I said, the table structure, it's not the prettiest thing to look at. And now I have a simple table. Again, on the breadcrumb, I can see now that the table element is simple table. I have a simple table row and a simple table entry. So the table was converted. Another useful feature is about reporting unreferenced key definition. So if I use, I'm not gonna talk about the importance of keys in DITA documentation, about indirection and why it's a good practice. I'll just assume that we are in such a project that uses key definition. So I want to make sure that the key definitions are used, and when a key definition is not used, it signals a potential problem. So to catch these situations, I will go on the DITA Maps Manager toolbar on the Validate and Check for Completeness action. And now I can select this Report Unreferenced Key Definitions. And let's check this particular map, and we'll get a warning saying that the key definition Oxy Voice, it's not used anywhere in my documentation. Now, this key is mapped to a topic named oxyvoice.dita, and I'm pretty sure that this topic is used somewhere in the documentation. So in the DITA Maps Manager view again, I will use the search references action, and just as I expected, this topic is indeed referenced here in this other topic about how to make a call. So this is the documentation for a mobile phone. So the topic about how to make a call on the phone. And this topic is indeed referenced, but it's referenced directly, not through the key definition that we've seen earlier. So what I will do is I will delete this reference. So, and from the DITA Maps Manager, I will drag and drop this topic. And now I have a reference that uses the key. So it's based on a key ref. It uses the Oxy Voice feature key definition that we saw earlier. Another useful action is the one that allows you to rename keys. So let's rename this key, Oxy Voice feature. From the DITA Maps Manager contextual menu, I will select rename key, and I don't know, let's say something with a rename suffix to make it easier to observe what happens. Next, again, I can preview, and not only the key definition, the one on the topic ref, was changed, but also all the occurrences of that key were updated. So there will be no broken references in my documentation. So let's click Finish, and this key-based reference was updated if you want to double check it. The last feature that I want to present, it's a report for unreferenced reusable elements. Now, what is a reusable element? So a reusable element is those elements that are intended to be reused across my documentation. It is a good practice to organize these elements in the so-called warehouse topics. And Oxygen identifies these warehouse topics because they are referenced in your map structure with the processing role set to resource only. So that's how Oxygen knows that this topic is a warehouse topic. So Oxygen will collect the elements that have IDs from these topics, and these are your reusable elements. And in Oxygen, we have a dedicated view, it's called DITA reusable components, that presents the key definitions as well as these reusable components. So the elements with IDs collected from these warehouse topics. Now, as your documentation evolves, there's always the chance that some reusable components are no longer used, either because maybe they're deprecated, in which case they should just be deleted from the warehouse topic, or maybe writers don't know about their existence, and instead of reusing them, they are duplicating content. So to catch these situations, again in the DITA Maps Manager, in the Validate and Check for Completeness section, I will activate the Report on Referenced Reusable Elements. And let's click Check. And as it happens, I have a lot of these elements in my documentation. So this is a section about what a fingerprint scanner is, about the voice assistant. So at this point, I would have to make a decision if either I should remove these elements from my warehouse topics, or maybe search a bit through the documentation and identify some places where I should actually had reuse this content here instead of duplicating it. So it's time to jump to the next topic, and that's the Web Author. The Web Author is our solution for editing in a browser, and in the new version that we've released, there are a couple of features that I would like to emphasize. So for example, you've seen that the WebHelp Responsive knows how to highlight and how to render image maps. Well, the Web Author also has an image map editor. So if my documentation, this is a DITA topic, contains an image map, I can click on this image map editor action, and I can either change the existing hotspots, or I can add new ones, move the existing ones, and so on. And when I click OK, the DITA topic it's updated. And this editor is available for image maps in also not only for DITA, for the DITA vocabulary, but also for the dogbook vocabulary, HTML, and TI. So this is a feature that was already, the DITA map, the image map editor was already available in Oxygen standalone version, and now was also added in the Web Author. Now, we also made many productivity enhancements. So small things that help a lot if you're doing certain actions quite often. So for example, if you use change tracking, previously to accept or reject change tracking, we had the contextual menu somewhere in the review panel, but now the actions are more accessible. So you can they are just one click away. You can accept or reject, accept or reject all of them. Also, usually when you press enter inside the editing area, you get this pop-up window in which you can choose to either split a paragraph or to insert an element. What you can do now is to activate what we call a smart enter mode. So if I am in a paragraph and I press enter, it will directly break this paragraph into two paragraphs. Or if I'm in a list item and I press enter, it directly creates a new list item for me to write. Of course, you still have access to that previous window in which you were able to choose which element to insert if you press Control Enter, like so. So you won't lose any functionality. It's just a smarter way a simple enter behaves. So this concludes the first part of this webinar. George, I think it's time for my colleague Octavian to show you some more great things in Oxygen version 20.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, I will make Octavian now the presenter to show you some of the development, XML development related functionality in version 20. Hi, Octavian.
Okay, thank you, George. So I will show you the new features that we added on the development part in Oxygen 20. I have here an overview of the presentation. So there are features related to the XSLT. There is a new Saxon version available. Also, the Schematron support was updated. A new version of Schematron Quick Fixes was added, and also some improvements on the JSON part. So let's start with XSLT improvements. So we added full XPath content completion support in text value templates in this new version. Also search and refactoring action, and we added an interesting feature that will present in the content completion window the documentation of the functions and templates, so you can easily determine what the function does, and you can use and pass the correct parameters and get the correct result. I will show you some examples with these new features. So let's start with the first one, the full support. So we added full content completion support, full XPath content completion support. We present the built-in functions in text value templates, the user-defined functions, axes, also the variables and the parameters from the context. Let's switch to Oxygen and see how it looks. So I have here a style sheet. It's a 3.0 style sheet and has this attribute expand text with the value true. This means that you can use text value templates, this with curly brackets marked here. And if I remove this attribute, we can notice that the text value templates are marked as simple text, so now they will not be processed. So we need to set this attribute on a parent element in order to insert a text value template. And if I want to insert a new one here, I just insert some curly brackets, and then to start the content completion, you press space or control space, and we notice that we get the function, the axis in the content completion. And let's insert a function. This is a function that is defined here in my style sheet, and insert multiply, and then I'll insert the count, and I will count the number of sequence items from the sequence parameter, and I will multiply with the number of items from the names variable. And now I can also run this style sheet, and I obtain a result here with the sorted items, the number of items, and the new text value template that I inserted. So you can create complex XPath expressions in text value templates with this support, but you also need to search and refactor the content from the text value template. So if you want to search a variable or a function, so you need to find where is it, where is used. Then you need to find also in the text value templates, and also if you want to rename it, want to rename it also if it's referred in a text value template. This support was added also in the new version, and I will show you some examples. So if I click on one of the parameters, we notice that it's highlighted in all the places where it's used, and I have this quick assist menu here that allows me to search, for example, for the occurrences of this parameter, and I get the results here. I can also use another feature that will rename, for example, this function and say multiply of and hit enter, and it's rename automatically in all the places where it's used. Then another feature that we added that I consider it is important because allows you to see the documentation of the functions and templates where you use it in the content completion window. So you can easily determine what the function does. You can see the parameters, the return, and I'll show you an example. I have here this style sheet that contains some functions that are documented. And if I start the content completion here, we notice that we get the functions, but also the documentation of the function that is before the function here. And I can easily see each function and the parameters that I need to pass to the function, and also what the function returns. So it's easier for me to develop my style sheets. And if you use XML comments, for example, to document your functions, and I'll insert here an XML comment, and I'll copy the comment from here and remove this documentation. So if you use XML comments to document your function, then you'll get also the comments from the documentation from that comments in the content completion window. We added also some support to overwrite parameters. For example, if you want to create a wrapper style sheet and you want to overwrite a parameter from the imported style sheet, then you can use the content completion support to get the parameters that can be overwritten in the context. I'll not get into detail here. Another feature that was added on the XSLT support is the convert action that allows you to convert XSL attribute to inline attributes. If you want to obtain a more compact form, you can use this action, and I will show you an example. I have here a style sheet which contains an anchor and some XSL attributes. So I can select these attributes, then use the refactoring actions from the contextual menu and use the convert XSL attribute to attributes. And now I get the inline attributes. You have also an action that will convert the attributes back to XSL attributes if you want to use a more complex processing on the attributes. Another feature is the refactoring action that extracts a template now allows you to set also the type of the parameters that are extracted in the new template. There are a lot of refactoring actions in the XSLT support, for the XSLT support, and you can check all of them on our user manual. And there are here also examples if you want to see what the action does. Next, we updated also the Saxon version. In 20, we have Saxon 9808. We have also older version of Saxon 96, 97, and newer ones, the latest one. But these are available as add-ons and can be installed. Let's switch to Oxygen. So if you want to transform or validate or debug a style sheet, I will create a scenario. You'll see here that you have the Saxon 9808, and if you want to install another version, you need to go to Help menu, Install New Add-ons, and select the update site. And here are presented the add-ons that are available for my Oxygen, and I have here 96, 97, and the latest Saxon version that can be installed, and then you'll use it for validation or transformation. So in Oxygen Saxon, it's built in. You don't need the license for Saxon PE or EE, so it's free to use in Oxygen, and it's used for XSLT validation, execution, debugging, also for compiling style sheets, XQuery validation, execution, and debugging, for Schematron and SQF, and also for the XML schema validation. We updated also the Schematron support. So in the latest version, we made a major update to the Schematron support, and now we added some improvements. We added syntax highlight, content completion, and search and refactoring support for these documents attributes. I'll show you an example. So now on a pattern, you can specify a set of documents on which the pattern will be applied. And here now you can use content completion if you want to process the content, or you can use also variables from the context, and you have also support to search or rename these variables very easily. I will not get into detail here how to use it. Next, a new version of Schematron Quick Fix has been released. So if we go here to the Schematron Quick Fix GitHub project, we notice that a new draft was released in March, and we updated Oxygen with the latest changes that are done on this specification. For those who don't know, the Schematron Quick Fix is an extension of the Schematron standard and allows you to define operations that will be applied to fix issues reported by Schematron. I'll show you some examples with this new support. So the multilingual support was changed, and support to generate multiple similar fixes. Also, the string replace operation was updated. Now you can use flags to ignore cases, for example. So the multilingual support in Oxygen allows you to set the same set of rules, but present them in different languages. For example, if you have multiple projects, or if you have projects in different languages but translated, and you want to impose the same set of rules, you can define these messages depending on the language of the application, and you can present those messages to the user depending on what language you want to use. And I will show you an example here. Let's close these files. I have here a simple example for flowers. So by default, the language, Oxygen uses the language of the application. So if I validate this file, we can notice that you get the message in English because I have the English language as my language, but you can control it from options, preferences, and you can change the language of the application, or you can use a custom language. For example, if I want to present the message in Japanese for my file, then I can select this message, this custom language, and now I get the quick fix in Japanese and the message. And if I want to use German, for example, I can set German language and I will get the message in German, but it's the same quick fix. I'll show you how you can do this. So you need to refer some IDs in the title and in the paragraph for the quick fix to get these messages in different languages. These are alternative messages, and depending on the options, depending on the application language or depending on your custom options, you can present these messages in a specific language. To do this, I have here the schematron that applies on the file that I showed you earlier. So you have here a report that checks the styling of the title element and does not allow styles in title. And here I have the quick fix, and you can notice that I have some IDs referred here, which are alternative messages for my quick fix. And these messages are in German, in French, or Japanese, and depending on the application languages, that message will be used. So in Oxygen, we add the support to define these messages in the diagnostics element, and we also offer content completion support to refer them. For example, if you want to refer here a new message, you can check the content completion list and see what message you can refer, what IDs. You can also rename or search for a definition, search for the occurrences of a diagnostic and find where is defined, or if you are on a definition, you can go to the reference just by using search reference action, and it gets you the reference here. And if you want to rename one of them, you can use the rename component and just type here something, and automatically it's renaming all the places. You can add also these messages in separate files. For example, if you want to send them to translation and you don't want to have it in your Schematron file, and also the content completion support and the search and refactoring sorts, even in if you are using these separate files. I'll show you an example. So I have the same Schematron, but this time I have the messages added in separate files, the German, French and the Japanese, and I can control click on one of them, and I can see that I have here the diagnostics with the messages, but I can also get very easily to the reference just by using the search reference action, and it takes me to the schematron where it's used. And also the Japanese message, and you get a similar result, but now you have the messages separated. We added support also for the user entry to be presented in different languages, similar with the quick fix. The user entry is allows you to get input from the user, and a message is presented when the user enters the value. As I showed you, there are some options that allows you to control the language. So by default, the messages are presented in the language of the application, but you can use also the language of the Schematron file, or you can present all the messages, or use a custom language, as I did in the example. Another feature that we added on the Schematron quick fixes is that you can generate multiple similar fixes dynamically using this use for each attribute. This is useful when you have a set of values that you want to refer from your document, and you don't want to create a quick fix for each value. You can generate all the quick fixes very easily using this use for each attribute. I'll show you a simple example. So I have here this use for each. I have here a file which contains some participants and then some teams, and I have a rule that checks that the participant is valid when it's added in the team. And if I click this icon, you see that it gets me it says that the participant is not valid, and it presents me the valid participants from the XML file. So it collects the participants directly from here, and if I enter a new participant, let's say that I want a new one, set a name, and I go to the problem, I can see that I get also this one. So it's dynamic added here in the list, and I can correct the problem. And this is the Schematron. So it's a rule that checks that a member it's in the participants list and shows this problem. And then for each participant, there is an expat expression here that for each participant it generates a fix that says that the value should be set to the participant ID, and then just replaces the current value with the correct one. We offer also content completion support, and we offer syntax highlighting support for the use for each attribute, so you can easily insert your expat expression in the use for each attribute. And also we present the SQF current, which is the current item, current match from the use for each expat expression, if you want to use it when you develop your quick fix. This SQF current is available only when this use for each attribute it's added on a fix. Another change that was made on the Schematron quick fix specification is that the keep attribute, the keep element was renamed to SQF copy of. this SQF copyoff does the same thing as XSL copyoff, but if you don't want to use the XSL in your schematron, then you can use this SQF copyoff element. As I told you, for the string replace operation, we added this flags attribute that allows you to control the flags that will be applied on the regular expression. So you can say that you want to replace something by in no ring case, for example, and are the same flags that can be set for the XSL analyze string instruction. We improve also the content completion and search and refactoring support for the user entries. As I told you, the user entries allows you to get input from the user, are similar can be similar with like variables or parameters. I'll show you a simple example in Oxygen. So I have here some user entries, and when you want to refer it, now you get them in the content completion, but you can also search. You can use the search, the rename actions. If you want to rename something in your file, it's easier now. And if I want to use this user entry, I will get, for example, here it says that I want to surround this image with a link, and I can type the anchor. Let's say Oxygen XML.com, and then a title, let's say site, and here the content that I inserted, it's added, and a mistake. For the JSON, we added some improvements on the JSON scripts from the XHTML documents, and we added also some the syntax highlighting for DITA code block elements. There are also some improvements on the folding part, so we can expand and collapse also arrays now, and the pretty print was improved in the new version. I will not get into detail here. Maybe I'll have time in another webinar. So now I think I will get Alex to talk about the add-ons from Oxygen, the new add-ons. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Octavian. Yes, Alex wants to show you a bit more about what we did in Oxygen 20.
Okay, so I hope there's still some energy left. So I can tell you something about the new Oxygen add-ons. So the Oxygen add-ons are basically additional pieces of functionality that you can easily install in Oxygen just by going to Help, Install New Add-ons, and you should just select here all available sites, and you'll see everything that can be installed in Oxygen. And in Oxygen, together with Oxygen version 20, we've also released a couple of such add-ons that I want to present to you. So just remember that if you want to install any of these add-ons, you just select it, click next, and you follow the installation procedure, and after an Oxygen restart, you will have its functionality. So why did we choose why did we choose to release these additional functionality as add-ons? Well, mainly because it allows us a faster release cycle. So as soon as we get feedback from you, we can make the fixes, add the functionality, and we don't have to wait for the next Oxygen version. As soon as it gets past the quality assurance team, we can create another build. So the first add-on, it's a Git plugin for Oxygen. We received this request a lot of times, and the first thing we asked ourselves was why? Because there are already good clients available out there. Why would our user need a Git plugin inside Oxygen? And what we've discovered is that all of these good clients are outside Oxygen, and switching context is annoying. And because you most commonly use actions like commit, push, and pull, these actions will actually force you to switch between Oxygen and this external Git client quite often. And last but not least, Oxygen has a great diff tool, and people were asking how to get it to be used for Git as well. So I'll switch to Oxygen to present you this plugin. So after you install the plugin, as I've shown you with the install new add-ons action, you'll get this Git staging view. And as soon as so in it on the toolbar, you'll have some actions to clone a new repository, push or pull changes, maybe to switch branches, to go into sub-modules. Of course, to select the working copy if you already have a local Git repository. So we've started to, we try to start small with a basic functionality and build on top of it based on user requests. So what other functionality you miss in it. So for example, if I were to change this data topic here and some other things, put some text in it and save, this Git staging will present to me all the changed files in my working copy, and I can discard changes, stage them, open in compare editor, as I told you is Oxygen diff tool. So I can stage it and maybe commit with a message. And I see that I have some changes that are coming, so I can pull the changes. But unfortunately, this particular topic that I've edited was also changed. So now I have a conflict. And I can see the conflict here. It has this little warning icon. And to resolve it, of course, I can choose resolve using mine or theirs, but I can also open it in Oxygen's three-way diff. And I can see what my changes are, what the changes in the remote version are, and I can make the merging. I'll take the change in the remote file and I'll keep my change as well and just save. And now the conflict was resolved. The file is put in the staging area. So all I have to do now is give a message that I resolved the conflict and commit it and push these changes to the remote repository. The plugin also integrates with Oxygen's project view, so you'll have a Git submenu from where you can commit changes, or you can start the diff tool if you want. So this is what functionality we have so far, but like I said, we are open to suggestions, and our future plans regarding these plugins currently regard branches and remote management, and we want to focus more on the user experience, making things more intuitive in that staging view. The next plugin regards XSpec. So XSpec is a unit test and behavior-driven development framework for writing unit tests for XSLT and Schematron. It is a project on GitHub, and it's quite alive. Version 1 was released this winter. Actually, it's the version that brings the Schematron unit testing functionality. And because we think that writing unit tests for your style sheets, for your schematrons, is a good practice, we wanted to encourage people to write such unit tests. And we've done that by offering a built-in support for XSpec into Oxygen, but we've also created an XSpec plugin. So let me show you what this plugin brings. So I'll go to Oxygen again and open an XSpec file. So an XSpec file consists in a number of scenarios. Each scenario has a label, and it can call a function or a template, or apply some templates. And then you have these expect elements in which you express what should happen. So for example, this escape function should print for this input, should give this output. If I give these phrases to a specific template that processes phrases, these phrases should be escaped like this. So I'm making assertions. This XSpec plugin contributes an action on the toolbar, is this green action here. And if I click it, the XSpec test results view will be presented. The unit tests are run, and I can see the results. So I can focus only on the failed tests. So if I click this action here on the toolbar, I can see just the failed tests. And I can click show to go in the editor on the assertion that failed. I can see a quick diff of what the expected results is and what it should be. But especially if you're asserting XML structure, seeing the differences in such a way can be difficult. So it can be difficult to understand what's happening. So in these cases, if you click diff, again, Oxygen's diff tool will be launched. So here I can easily see that the expected result says that for these two phrases, nothing should be escaped. So, this particular template that I'm testing, if it escapes a phrase, it puts the status attribute to same. Sorry, if it doesn't touch a phrase, it will put the status attribute to the same value. But if the phrase is escaped, it basically escapes characters that have meaning in regular expressions. So if it does something in a phrase, then it sets the status attribute to changed. So this is the expected result. And what happens is that it does the other way around. So things that weren't changed have the changed status, and things that were actually changed have the same. So something is wrong in, in my escaping template. So it's something wrong in the CSS, so in the style sheet, sorry. So what I will do is I will go in the style sheet for which I have written this unit test, and I will focus on the template that processes these phrase elements. And I can see here that the text of a phrase is passed through this escape function, and here I have a condition, and it states that if the escaped text is the same as the original text, then the status attribute is set to change. So here is where the error is. It should say if the escape text is different from the original one, then the value should be changed. So I make this change, and I will run the scenario again, and this time my scenario has passed. So the only scenario that fails is that other one. Right, so how are we getting on the time? Another plugin is called Dogbook Validate and Check for Completeness, and this time it's a plugin for Dogbook, and it contains a lot of checks that are normally not covered by the standard validation, so the validation based on the schema. We had this tool for a while now for DITA documents, and we had a lot of requests to add something similar for Dogbook. So, for example, the standard validation won't catch broken links or missing images, or even more complicated profiling attributes conflicts. So, just to show you a quick example, I have here a Dogbook element, a Dogbook document. So if I am that describes a couple of lakes in the Fogarach Mountains, if I validate this topic, this article, it says validation successful here on the bottom. But if I invoke the Dogbook Validate and Check for Completeness tool on the toolbar, I'll just apply it on the current file and set it to use the profiling condition set. And I hit check. You see that I actually have two errors here. First, it's a broken link, and to fix it, I can use the attribute editor. And the second one is a profiling condition conflict. So from this lake, I have a reference to another lake, but this other lake, the Kaltsun Lake, it's marked as being reachable only by an expert audience, or only by the expert climbers. So in my published output for the novices, this Kaltsun Lake won't exist. So to fix it, maybe I'll just assume that both lakes are accessible to novices. So I'll mark this as being for the novice audience as well. Save the file. And if I validate and check for completeness again, this time the validation is successful, as you see here on the bottom. Another plugin that we've recently introduced is called DITA Translation Package Builder, and it's intended to help people that write DITA documentation translate that documentation to various languages. So Why we created this plugin? Well, because translation costs, and usually the translation provider will charge you by the word. So 12 cents for each word, for example. And translation memories help, which means that words that are a total match will cost you just a fragment for compared with words that have no match, and maybe words that are just a partial match will cost somewhere in between. But the idea is that you will still be charged for words that are total matched, and this is what we want to avoid. And what this plugin does is that, unfortunately, I don't have time to make a live demonstration, so luckily I just created these charts. So the first step is to create a milestone to mark your documentation before starting to work on it. It's a moment at which you have the same documentation, the same content in, let's say, in English and in French, and you create this milestone file, which basically it's just it creates a hash, an MD5 for each of your topics. So that's the first step. And next, you start editing your map and you make changes. When you want to release your documentation and you want to also get it translated, you generate, using the previously created milestone file, you'll generate a package that will contain just those modified topics, in my case T1 and T2, and you will send that to the translation provider. From the translation provider, you will get another package with the French version of those modified files. And using again this plugin, this translation package builder, you will merge these French topics into the French version of your documentation, and you will get the next version of your map in that other language. So that's how this translation package builder works. We have more plugins, but unfortunately we have no more time. So George.
Thank you, Alex. We want to follow up with a few additional webinars, going more in depth on some of the presented features in version 1.20. And we want to ask you also for your feedback, or what will be the topics of interest for you to see additional webinars. So what we should cover in our next webinars. Here we listed some of the topics. For instance, the WebHelp Responsive templates that Alex presented earlier, to go into more details on Schematron rules and Schematron quick fixes, or to show you how to create unit tests for XSLT and Schematron. So maybe showing some additional details of that XSpec plugin and XSpec support in Oxygen in general, or the Oxygen Content Fusion collaboration tool, which allow you to share documents from your desktop, have users access them just using the browser. That takes advantage of the Oxygen Web Author that Alex presented earlier. And then you have in Oxygen an option to just merge those changes back into your local copy that you use to create the original shared content. So also, you please use the questions panel to suggest other topics we will look over them and try to see what you want and how we should prioritize the what are our next webinars. So I will close this now, and let's see also some of the results. So yeah, we should cover probably the Oxygen content fusion a bit, and then I see that XSLT and Schematron also has a lot of hits. So thank you for sharing this information with us, and now we should try to quickly get through some of your questions. So one question was exactly about additional webinars, if we will cover more deeply some of the topics that we presented. And as you see, this is exactly what we plan to do. And hopefully we'll be able to organize a webinar every 2 weeks or so and show you some more details about specific parts of functionality. Another topic was about the image map editor. What types of images can be edited in the image map editor? Well, the image map editor does not actually edit an image. The image map information is layered on top of an actual image. The image map basically defines some regions on the image and associates them with the additional information, like linking to a specific section or a specific topic and so on. And the images that are supported are any image type is supported by Oxygen. Most common image types are supported directly, and if you have some strange image type, we have a plugin architecture that actually inherited from Java that allows to support any type of image. Can you explain what problems are caused by unreferenced key definitions? There are no actual problems caused by an unreferred key definition, but that may hide some issues. As Alex presented, you may have a reference directly to a topic, and then if you think that if you just change the key definition, all references will change, that will not happen. Or sometimes you want to clean up your code, and this is a useful way to identify things that are not used, including key definitions, for instance. So as your project evolves, let's say, some keys may be deprecated and may not be useful anymore. So it's your chance to identify those, similar to the unused reusable components, and be able to clean up your project. What happens in the use for each feature? What happens in the SQF? What happens when there are hundreds of thousands of options that are selected by the use for each? I think that in such cases, a user entry may be a better choice. But Octavian, maybe you can add some details to that.
Yes, the idea is that right now we don't provide a limit to the number of items presented, but in the use for each expat expression, you can control the number of items that you want to create the quick fixes for. So I think it's better to do this directly from the Schematron and do not generate I don't know, hundreds of items and just select some of them. So it depends on the situation, but you can control this from Schematron, from the Schematron Quick Fix attribute.
Yeah, there is also a use when attribute in SQF similar to the one from Schematron. So then, for instance, you can dynamically generate fixes only when the count of the items, for instance, is less than 10 or something like that. So you can generate that fix controlled by a use when attribute, where you can say, check that the counter is the number of fixes that will be generated is less than 10. And then with use when you can generate a user entry for cases where you have more than 10 options, for example. But in any case, I think that drop down provides a scroll view, right? And if there are more, you should be able to scroll between
Yeah, sure.
them.
The represent you'll be able to see all of them, but as you said, sometimes you don't need to present hundreds of choices. You can offer a user entry, a dialog, and provide the value from there.
Another question was about SQF user entry. If it's possible to use, for instance, something similar to what we have in the author mode that provides a URL chooser, for instance, or
Yes, in the user for a user entry, you can define a type which is a schema type. You can say that it's an integer or it's an URI or it's I don't know, a date. Right now, we don't have support for this. We have an issue on our issue tracker, and I note this, and maybe we'll have it on the next version. Or
oh, so I didn't knew that, and I replied privately that it will be interesting to have a type, and then so that's already in Schematron. It's only that in the SQF, but we do not yet support that. So that will be great to as an addition for the user entry support then. Okay. A lot of nice words about the add-ons that Alex presented. And a few suggestions about additional webinars, about plugins, what plugins are available and how to create a plugin. Actually, we had last year, I think at XML Prague, we had a workshop on, Alex presented a workshop, a 2-hour workshop on creating Oxygen plugins, which was quite well received, and we should follow up with a webinar, yes, on that. Now a question about responsive web help. How can I include a customized search.js in the WebHelp Responsive in the publication template? Alex, can you say something about that, or we should follow up
It's
that
best to
offline?
follow up.
Offline.
Yes, we'll follow up online.
So we'll follow up with an email on that. Another suggestion for webinars is related to a webinar related to the use of projects. I think we have a recorded webinar that covers exactly that. Maybe
I wrote an answer there. Yes, we made a webinar a while back, but if the interest is great, then maybe we can redo it.
Yeah, so the recording of that webinar is available, and I think you should be able to find that on our, maybe you can paste that link also publicly in the chat window, Alex. Just to finish the webinar, I want to remind you some of the events that we attend or sponsor. So we'll be at the DITA North America conference later in April in Denver, Colorado. Then evolution of technical content in Sofia. We sponsored the Markup UK and the Balizage conferences. We will be at LavaCon, DITA Europe, DC World, and we plan also to organize the DITA Open Toolkit Day again this year. Thank you for attending our webinar. Thank you, Alex, Octavian, and we hope to see you soon at some of the follow-up webinars that we plan.
Thank you all. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.